Hi, welcome to the Intuitive Writer Activation Workshop, a free online course dedicated to helping you unlock and access your natural intuitive writing abilities. I'm your instructor, author Camille Peacock. Please support this free content by hitting the subscribe button and telling all your writing buddies. Thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy the course. Hello everyone, welcome to Module 3 of the Intuitive Writer Activation Workshop. And today I'm super excited. We're going to delve into your Intuitive Writer Toolkit. So when we talked about intuition, we described it as your spiritual antenna array. And within this spiritual antenna array, you're going to have different ways of connecting with the universe. So I want you to think of it as almost like electronic device cables. So I don't know about you, but I have a bunch of electronic devices around the house and they all have different cables. So I've got one cable for my Kindle. I have one cable for my iPad. I have one cable for my microphone. I mean, whatever it is, right? They all have different cables. So that's a little bit how your Intuitive Writer Toolkit is set up. So the point of these cables is to connect with electricity. And the tools in your Intuitive Writer Toolkit, the point of them is to connect with your intuition and to connect with the universe. So I hope this metaphor helps you understand a little bit more what we're going to be talking about today. Now, there are 6 main tools in your Intuition Toolkit, so we're going to delve into each one of those now. Let's get started. The first tool is intuitive seeing, and this is the ability to see into the spirit realm. And you do this with your third eye. This is located in the center of your forehead. I also like to call it my inner eye. When I first started working with my intuition, this was the intuitive muscle that started to develop first. And I think that's because as a writer, I have a very vivid imagination. So this might be the case for a lot of you. You might be able to start seeing very quickly and very easily. So I want to give you a little example of what it's like to use this particular intuitive muscle. And one thing that happens quite a bit when I'm meditating and I'm working on a particular scene in a story, I'll see it play out like a movie, which is really kind of cool. Yeah, you sit back and you watch the characters do what they're going to do, and then you get to go write about it. So that's pretty fun. Another way is a lot of times characters will show up and show themselves to me. So an example of how that happened recently, I was sitting in meditation and I was working on a scene for book 1 in one of my new series. And already in book 1, I knew that in future books, there were going to be several members of the chess club that came into the story. And I could already feel that these chess club members had soul, so I knew I was going to get a chance to work with some new characters, even though I didn't yet understand what it was going to look like. So in the middle of working on this scene, one of the characters from this future book stepped in to see me. Teenage boy, kind of tall, gangly, geeky, and he was wearing a dress. So this was shocking to me. I didn't see that coming at all, but there he was in a dress, and the message was loud and clear. He's a transgender, and he was going to have a journey, a coming out journey in a future book. And this is one of the things I love about intuitive writing, is it really can as a writer, challenge you to go other places that you probably wouldn't go on your own. There's the old writing paradigm of write what you know. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that over the years as being a writer. Oh, just write what you know. Well, you know what? When you're working with the universe and intuition, guess what? You're gonna have to sometimes write about things you don't know. So yeah, it was really cool and interesting that the spirit chose to work with me, especially because I don't have a big toehold in the LGBT community. But luckily I do have a soul sister who is part of that community. And so when this character showed up, I called her and I'm like, look, you gotta educate me here because I don't pretend to know anything about this. And it was great. So we had a really long talk and I learned a ton, and she referred me to a bunch of documentaries. So I have some work to do to research so I can really connect with this character and really bring him out with as much authenticity and love as I can. So those are just two examples of how your intuitive seeing might work. The next of your tools is intuitive emotion. Now, I'm very empathic on both the physical plane as well as the spiritual plane. I feel the emotion of people all the time, and I feel it when my characters show up. And this can be really intense to carry the feelings of someone else. So it's okay. It might be overwhelming and scary sometimes, but it is okay. You can do it. I do it. So let me give you an example of how that shows up. I was working on a book in my Undead Ultra zombie series, and I had a character named Jessica show up. And Jessica was a victim of sexual assault, and it was really important to her that this topic be addressed in my book. And so I would sit down to write, and these rape scenes would come out of my fingers. And I'll tell you, I had a lot of resistance. I was like, I'm not going there in my books. Like, I'm not talking about rape. So I'd write them and then I'd delete them because I didn't want them to be part of my book. And I'll tell you, she was very insistent. And when she came to me, I would feel her rage. She carried a lot of rage. And I would also see her. So I actually was working with two of my gifts at the same time. So when she came to me, she usually showed herself to me as a deranged clown. She had on really heavy makeup that was all smeared, really heavy black eyeliner that was smeared, really crazy blonde hair, and she would wear this gold and black corset with a tutu, and she would rage. I mean, she would rage. I would see her for hours, and she had this tennis racket, and she used it like a flamethrower, and she would blow things up and burn things down with this flamethrower tennis racket, and she would scream. And she'd come through a lot on my long runs. I connect a lot with the universe when I run because I'm in a really relaxed state. And I remember having this 2-hour run where like she just went crazy, burning things down and blowing things up with this flamethrower tennis racket. And all her rage was funneling through me, and I just remember just crying, like just running for a couple of hours and just crying almost the whole time because it was so heavy. And again, like I said, I had a lot of resistance to working with her, even though obviously she was there and she had a message. And then what really helped me along is I was sitting in a psychic circle with a medium one day, and you never know when you're in these circles if Spirit's going to show up for you or not, but I was the first one. The medium called on me. She said, I have a message for you. There's something you're supposed to be writing and you're not. So of course immediately I knew that it was Jessica. Like, oh, okay. I guess I know that I'm being called to do this, but it's so hard. So I did finally accept that I was going to have to bring sexual assault into my story in a really graphic way. And I'm not gonna lie, it was really hard. It was hard. It was hard to write the scene. It was hard to feel that rage move through my body. But what was really amazing is that along with the rage, I began to really feel her strength, that even though this experience had decimated her, it also built her up and made her so strong and so amazing. And that strength really comes through in the story, both the rage and the strength. And her tennis racket is in the story too. She kills zombies and bad guys with her tennis racket. So it's very cool. And that's a example as well of how co-creation works. I mean, obviously there is no such thing as a tennis racket flamethrower, but I did pay honor to that tennis racket and it made its way into my story. Oh, and she does light things on fire. She lit a fort on fire in the book as she was battling these bad guys. And when I finally got it all out, when I finally let all of that raw emotion just funnel through me onto the page and I honored it, I went and I sat with her. I remember it being like the middle of the night because it was so hard to work on. And she showed up And of course, again, I saw the deranged clown. And as I was sitting with her, she transformed from the deranged, wounded clown into a little girl, like maybe 1 or 2 years old. She was happy. She was laughing, running around. She had a little white dress on with her cute little curly blonde hair. And she was happy. And when I asked why, she came to me and why I was asked to include this in my book, the answer that I got was that so many times in cases of sexual assault, there's so much shame around it and it's so hidden, and the victims carry the shadow and shame and they're never witnessed as victims. And that was what this was all about, was Jessica needed to be witnessed. She needed people to see what she went through. And so that's what all that was about. So that is an example of how intuitive emotion can show up and how you can work with it. And yeah, I have a lot of cry fests. So maybe you will too. It's okay, we get through it. Now, the next tool that I'm going to talk about is intuitive knowing. And there's a couple ways that this shows up for me with knowing. A lot of times when I'm working on a book, I'll have a knowing, and I will know when I've gone the wrong direction, when I've gone off the track, so to speak. I'll just all of a sudden realize that, oh, I went the wrong way. I need to backtrack. I don't always know how I went wrong or where exactly the bad turn was made, but I do know that I need to backtrack. And that shows up as a knowing as I'm writing. Another example is this can be those aha moments that we've talked about before, those flashes of inspiration where all of a sudden you'll just have something. You'll just receive a really quick insight into whatever you're working on. And that's a knowing. And then it can also be much more intense and much more prolonged. There was a time recently when I was working on my book that my guides woke me up in the middle of the night, time to work. And I downloaded probably for almost 2 hours, and what I got was just a flow of knowing, just all this information. And what I got that night was the arc of the 3rd book in the series. Even though I was still working on number 1, I got the arc for number 3. It's sometimes in instances like that, what you're gonna feel is the information that wants to come to you, it's actually gonna enter your body and you can feel it. When I woke up that night, I was so tingly. It felt like I had electricity running through my body, and it was really itchy. So that's what woke me up, is I was itching from all this energy that wanted to come through. So I sat with my journal and I let everything, all that information flow through me. The energy drains out of your body, and you can tell when it's finished moving through you. Yeah, so that's an example, an extreme example of how your intuitive knowing can work for you. The next tool is intuitive hearing, and this is talking with the energies and your guides and whoever is there to work with you. And in the last module, I shared how I spoke with Cassie, and she shared her story of how she was a World War I victim from Slovenia, and that was just a conversation that I had with her. But here's the thing about intuitive hearing. It's not like it is in the movies. It's not like spirit and has a megaphone in your ear shouting at you. It's very subtle. It's very soft. It can sound like a whisper. Sometimes it sounds like your own voice in your head. Sometimes when I'm working with this particular intuitive muscle, it almost feels like a very soft stamp on my consciousness, like the words are being very softly stamped into my awareness. And the other thing that I've noticed very recently, the more that I talk with spirit, I'm starting to detect where it's coming from. And it's always coming from outside my body. So what I'm really starting to notice is that it comes from the back right. And I can feel it flowing into my consciousness from back here. And so that's a really good indication to me that spirit is talking to me. Those are some examples of how your intuitive hearing can work. The next tool is intuitive smell, and I have to admit, this is not one that I use very often with my writing, but it is something that I use in my everyday life. So I'm just going to share how it works for me, and then maybe that'll give you some insight of how it can work for you. I'm good at telling when people are sick by how they smell. So for example, many years ago, I had this beloved cat named Geronimo, and he was a little firecracker. And I came home from work, and of course I scooped him up in my arms like I did every day. And when I leaned down to kiss him and smell him, I knew immediately that he was sick. And I told my husband, sweetie, the cat's sick. And he's like, what do you mean he's sick? He looks fine. I'm like, no, he's sick. He smells sick. And we did end up tragically losing him a couple of weeks later to a really rare fungus. And so, yeah, I can often smell when people are sick. And then very recently, my family moved, and on the house hunting process, I could walk into a house, and just by how the house smelled, I knew if it was a yay or a nay. My daughter also has this gift. She can walk into a room too and know yay or nay if she's supposed to be there. So I imagine that if you used this intuitive muscle with your writing, I'm imagining that you could smell scenes. I'm imagining you could smell food or a setting or possibly even characters. So I'm really interested to see how this shows up for other people. So if this does end up being one of your intuitive muscles that works really well, send me a message, because I would love to hear how it works for you in your writing. Now, the last tool that we're going to talk about is intuitive taste. And again, this is not one that's very developed for me. I actually can't think of any instances where I have intuitively tasted anything. So how I imagine this showing up is you might be able to taste a scene, taste the food, taste the environment, taste the character. This is how I imagine it working. So again, if this is an intuitive muscle that ends up being really strong for you and something that you use, I would love to hear from you. So these are the 6 intuitive muscles that you're going to find in your intuitive writer toolkit. And as you work with your intuition, you're going to figure out which ones are your strongest and which ones you use the most. And they're also going to start working in conjunction with one another. I have 4 that are really strong, and they often work in conjunction with one another. So now we're going to get to the exercise portion of this module, and this is one I'm really excited for, because you're really going to get a chance to drill down and figure out how your intuition works. So what I want you to do is grab your journal from yesterday, because yesterday you were supposed to have really looked back at your writing practice and identify at least 5 moments when inspiration tapped you on the shoulder. And you were supposed to have drawn a line down the middle of your page and written those on the left-hand side. And I hope you have at least 5. If you have as many as 10, yay, awesome. So what I want you to do is go back and look at that list that you made and really dive back into your memory and examine those moments, and then examine those against the 6 intuitive muscles that we're talking about, and try to figure out which intuitive muscles you were using in that moment when you got that flash of inspiration. And this is going to be really important going forward. I mentioned in yesterday's module that I want you to be recording these aha moments when they come to you to build awareness. But likewise, I want you to be noticing which of your intuitive muscles that you're using, and also write that down as well. The more you record these things, it's really going to build your awareness. And having awareness of your intuition is a huge step in developing that intuitive muscle. And what's going to happen as you start recording these instances, and you're going to start taking note of when they happen, and you're going to start noticing that they happen all the time, every day. And again, that's just your muscle strengthening and your connection with the universe strengthening. So have fun with this exercise. Have fun discovering how your spiritual antenna array works and connects with the universe. And I will see everyone back here tomorrow for Module 4. Thanks. Would you like to maximize the content of the Intuitive Writer Activation course? be sure to download the free Intuitive Writer Activation Workbook, a companion PDF workbook designed to supplement and enhance the overall experience of the Intuitive Writer Activation Workshop. You can access this free workbook by joining the Intuitive Writer newsletter. Just click the link in the show notes to subscribe and you'll receive the link to download your free PDF workbook. Thanks so much, and please be sure to support the free content on this channel by hitting the subscribe button and sharing it with all your writing buddies. Thanks so much.